get interesting. And I mean that totally in a positive way, okay? Don't be scared. Let's talk about this a minute. It's getting interesting because we were taught probably in like elementary school, at least at some point in our life, we were taught how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. In algebra, which this is basically the beginning of algebra, okay? In algebra, we're still going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It's just that the expressions, when we see a problem, and if it's asking us to multiply, for example, it's not going to look the same way that we're probably used to seeing multiplication. And division is going to look a little bit different too. And so we need to talk about how this is the language of math now. Algebra, in my mind, is like the language of math. And so algebra tries to make the language of math simpler or easier to understand by actually taking away symbols and using other ideas to show that those operations, like a multiplication or division. And then on top of that, we have signs. Now we're doing integers, right? Remember that integers are positive and negative numbers. So being that we have positive and negative numbers that we're multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, we have to understand how to handle those signs. And there's a set of rules for that. In the video of adding and subtracting integers, I showed those rules for adding and subtracting. Today we're going to look at the rules for multiplying and dividing. So it sounds weird that algebra is trying to simplify the language by taking stuff out. But by taking those extra operations out, or extra symbols out of the expression, it allows for new symbols to come in. And so now you can have really complex things being expressed in an algebraic way. So we're going to talk about these things here, these 3 points today. The multiplication changes, the way that expression looks like now for us, and from here on out, pretty much from here on out, multiplication is going to look a little bit different. We're going to talk about the rules, right, for the multiplication and division. And here's an important concept. The concept is that numbers should only have one sign in front of the number, or to the left of the number. I always say in front. So numbers should only have one sign. And that's important because if we see a number that has more than one sign, then that means that we need to do something with those signs. You can't have so many extra signs. Numbers should only have one sign in front of it. So let's talk about the first thing here. And that is going to be the multiplication expression, how that's changing. Now, the first symbol we saw probably when we learned multiplication the first time was this little cross, this little X-looking thing, right? Or the symbol that is on a button on a calculator, right? On the calculator anyway. So this was probably what we're used to, 2 times 3. If you learned your math in the United States, at least, that I know of, I know that we also use this symbol, this dot, to symbolize multiplication. And if you're comfortable with those, great. You might have to start forgetting them because, no, don't forget them. I mean, you'll still see them on occasion. But multiplication is no longer going to be expressed in this way. Okay? So let's get you to start working towards that change. Now multiplication is going to start looking like these two. So this says 2 times 3, and it equals 6. And this says 2 times x, and that should equal to 6. So just so you know, now that we're talking about how algebra is this language of math, one of the language parts that you need to know is that this is called a variable. A variable is a letter that takes the place of an unknown number. Now, here I qualify that. I say, well, it's not totally unknown. I know that x is 3, okay? So this basically says 2 times some number represented by a letter, because we don't know what that number is, 2 times some number is equal to 6. So we know that that number has to be 3, so that 2 times 3 would give us that answer of 6. But I also qualify here. I say x is going to be 3. All right. And just so you know, the variables can be any letter. It's just very typical in algebra that we use x. I don't know who started that, but somebody started that. So we still use x almost all the time. But just so you know, it could be any letter, A, B, P, S, T, whatever. Okay? Anyway, so I asked my students, what is telling us that there's multiplication here? And for that matter, what's telling us that there's multiplication happening here? So this is what I mean where algebra is trying to get rid of symbols. It's trying to get rid of these two symbols. Okay, and I can understand why I was trying to get rid of this one, because it seems it looks a lot like this thing, which is a letter. Not a symbol, a letter. So just to eliminate that confusion, let's get rid of the symbol. Anyway, so what's going on here? What's going on in these two expressions? How do we know that they're being multiplied, right? So my students tell me it's the parentheses. The parentheses are telling you to multiply. No, I don't think so. I know that there are some teachers that teach it like that. They say that, well, if you have a number in parentheses, it's going to be multiplication. And then students start to think that parentheses symbolizes multiplication. But it's not the case. I couldn't do this, right? I couldn't put 2 open and close parentheses, 3 equals 6, right? That doesn't say 2 times 3. That doesn't say that. Well, I have parentheses. Well, you said parentheses equals multiplication, right? It doesn't. It's not that, actually. In my opinion, and again, I'm sure that there's lots of opinions out there about what the parentheses symbolize. But for me, talking about this, I think the same thing is happening in both of these expressions. So why aren't there parentheses here? So if you're telling me that parentheses is the multiplication, what's going on in this one then? How do I know it's multiplied? It's the same rule for both. And the thing here is that to show multiplication from here on out in algebra, multiplication will be shown or expressed when 2 numbers are right next to each other. You put one number here and you put the one right next to it, that means multiplication. That's it. Now, so Raul's saying, I'm telling you, why? Okay, Raul told me that if I put 2 numbers together, that means multiplication. Well, in this case, it doesn't work. Why? Because there's confusion. There's a little bit of confusion here. Is it 2 numbers? Is it 2 and a 3 put together? Or is it one number like 23? Because there's a little bit of confusion here. This is why we use parentheses, to eliminate that confusion, to say that it's not one number, 23, it's 2 numbers, 2 and a 3 stuck together to show that they're multiplied. So that's why we use parentheses, to eliminate confusion. And if you look here at the 2x, there isn't a confusion. There's no number like 20x or something like that, right? So it's okay here. We don't need parentheses. 2 and the x put together, we know that these 2 are multiplied together. So I don't like to say parentheses means multiplication. To me, I'd rather say when I put 2 numbers together, they're multiplied. If there's confusion when I put these 2 numbers together, that it could mean another number. To eliminate that confusion, I put parentheses around one of those numbers. Okay? Or both if I want to. So that's the big key. This is a big deal, all right? 2 numbers together, multiplication, all right? Okay. So let's talk about the next thing here, sign rules. So you have your rules for addition and subtraction, your sign rules for addition and subtraction. Here are your rules for multiplication and division. I'm just using this dot to kind of like an arbitrary symbol here, just kind of a general idea of it. It's going to be for both multiplication and division. Okay, we're just talking about the signs anyway. So here we go. If I multiply or divide a positive and a positive, my answer will be positive. If I multiply or divide a negative and a negative, my answer will be positive. It sounds weird, huh? I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's the rule. And positive times positive multiplied or divided by a negative will be a negative answer. And if we switch them around, negative and a positive together, that'll be a negative answer. Now, some people think of this as like there's 4 rules, but really, I think there's just 2 rules. In other words, those 2 rules would be when I'm multiplying or dividing, and both my symbols or both my signs are the same, I get a positive. And if I'm multiplying or dividing, both my signs are different or opposite, I get a negative. Okay? So try to maybe simplify it in your mind by thinking of it like just 2 basic rules. Okay? So write those down. You need those. Don't get these confused with the addition and subtraction rules. Okay? And again, if you're doing equations and you get equations wrong a lot, or if you're making mistakes a lot, those mistakes typically are the signs. again, we're not doing anything different than adding and subtract, or adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. We're just doing those 4 operations, but if you're not good with your signs, or if you're getting those rules mixed up about when you're adding, subtracting, and when you're multiplying, dividing, you're going to get those answers wrong. So here's your ounce of prevention. Get solid with your rules. Memorize them. And get better at understanding the language of math or algebra. Start understanding that multiplication looks like this now, right? Okay, so I need to multiply. When I'm multiplying, I need these rules, not the addition, subtraction rules, okay? This is where you really need to be good about managing this information, okay? All right. So, ounce of prevention, there's your clue for the day. All right. The other concept is that numbers should have one sign. Let's talk about that now. And we're going to just do a whole bunch of examples to exemplify those things, to show those things, okay? So, let's start doing that right away. And we'll start with 2 plus minus 3, or 2 plus a negative 3. Okay, this might look weird to some of you if you've never seen a number with 2 signs, or a number with a sign in parentheses and another sign outside. Whoa, right? It's not too bad. So that last rule that I had here that said that numbers should only have one sign in front of it. When I say in front, I mean to the left of it. So 3 actually has 2 signs to the left of it. Now, this is the correct way to express that, but it would be the same thing if I took away those parentheses. This still is wrong. I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, it's not the right way to write it. I mean, usually when a number has 2 signs, we just put parentheses around the number and the sign that's closest to it. But this still has the same, we still have to do the same thing, whether there's parentheses or no parentheses. We still can't have 2 signs in front of the 3, or to the left of the 3. Okay, but just to express that correctly, algebra says that we should put parentheses around the number and the sign that's closest to it. Okay, now what sign does the 2 have? The 2, if it's not explicitly written, remember that it's automatically a positive number. It just means that it's positive if there's no sign in front of it. Okay, so 3 can't have 2 signs. It can't be plus minus 3. What do? When we have this kind of thing happening, we just simply multiply the signs. Not the numbers, just the signs. So basically, I'm going to still have my plus 2, and I'm going to have a 3. I just don't know the sign yet. Okay, to find out what sign goes here, I need to multiply these 2 signs. So we go back to our little multiplication rules. And what were my signs? A positive and a negative multiplied together. Positive and a negative multiplied together gives me a negative. Okay, so multiply these 2 signs and I get a product. I get the answer is negative. All right. So this is where it gets a little interesting. Now, what do I do with these 2? How do I get to the final answer? Well, if you notice, they're not being multiplied. There's 2 numbers here, but they're separated by an operation, a minus or a subtraction, I guess. Now, if I did this, right, if I put the negative 3 inside parentheses, and I put this 2 right up against that parentheses, what I'm saying here is I'm putting the 2 right next to a negative 3. 2 amounts together would mean multiplication. But because there are no parentheses here, there is no multiplication. And I know it's not the parentheses that mean the multiplication, it's really the 2 amounts being stuck together. But it looks like the parentheses means multiplication. Anyway, so this is going to be an addition or a subtraction. Now we have to go back to those other rules, right? The rules of how to add and subtract integers. If you remember those from those videos, different signs means that we have to subtract. And then we'll keep the sign of the bigger number. So the bigger number here is 3. Its sign is negative. So we're going to keep the negative in the answer. I might as well just put that in the answer right away. Okay, because the 3 is bigger, it's negative. Keep the sign of the bigger number. Anyway, so then we subtract these because they're different signs. We subtract them, so 3 minus 2 is 1. And it's going to be negative 1 because I already said. Okay? All right, cool. Let's do more. Let's do more. And so I think you're starting to see that it's hard for me to explain multiplication and division without talking about addition and subtraction. They're so intertwined with each other, they're so interconnected. But this is where those rules, we have so many rules that we need to maintain in order, right? Okay, let's do another one. Minus 3 minus a minus 4 plus a minus 4. All right. Okay, so I have 3 numbers and 5 signs. Can't have that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs and only 3 numbers. Well, there's too many signs. Okay. So each number should only have 1 sign to the left of it or in front of it. So the 3 is okay. I'm just going to bring that guy down. He's ready to go. He's ready to rock and roll. It's these 4s that have too many signs, or 2 signs. 1 sign too many. What do we do when a number has 2 signs? We multiply the signs. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring down my numbers, because those are not going to change yet. We're not there yet. So minus and a minus, two negatives together. When we multiply them, it turns into a positive. So these 2, when we multiply them, will be positive. So it's not minus 4. It's plus 4. Okay? Same thing here. I'm going to do the multiplication of these 2 signs, a positive and a negative. So the positive times a negative is a negative. Different signs, negative. So it's not plus minus 4. It's actually just minus 4. All right. So here we have 3 numbers, 3 signs. Good. Check mark, right? That's a good thing. But there's nothing showing us to multiply. There's nothing showing us to divide. So the next thing to do is to add or subtract. Now, I should probably say that this is basically an introduction to the order of operations. Just to give you a short list of that, multiplication and division come before addition and subtraction. So if you have a multi-step problem that has multiplications and subtractions and additions, you got to do the multiplication first, and then you can do the addition and subtraction. Okay? And we'll talk more about that in the video of order of operations. Anyhow, so this is an addition or a subtraction depending on the signs. Now, if you remember from the video where we were doing addition and subtraction with integers, I said to group the ones that are of the same sign, or group the similar terms. In this case, it would be these ones, the 2 negative numbers. Just put those together first, okay? So remember, they're the same sign, we add them together and keep the same sign. So it would be 7, 3 plus 4 is 7, and because they're the same sign, we keep the same sign. Okay? All right, and we'll just bring down the 4 here. Different signs, remember the rule, different signs, and what I mean is, we're not looking at this rule anymore. We're not multiplying and dividing here. This rule goes to one side right now. We got to pull the rule from addition and subtraction to do these ones, okay? And this is what I mean. This is when my students get confused. They want to use that rule, the one I just had right here, all the time. And they forget about the addition and subtraction. I'm like, no. You got to pull that one over here too. Anyway, different signs, we subtract. 7 minus 4 is 3. And we subtract them, but we keep the sign of the larger number, in this case 7, and its sign is negative, so we keep negative. Okay, so this answer would be negative 3. All right, rocking and rolling. We got about 4 more. Okay, I'll try to hurry here. 4 minus 5 here. Okay, and then plus and minus 5. Okay, he's trying to recognize some of this. He's trying to get the language a little bit. We know that 5 can't have 2 signs, so we're going to have to multiply those 2 signs. So there's a multiplication. And here's another multiplication. Do you see it? The 4 is right up against the parentheses. Or we could say the 4 is right up against negative 5. Right? So we have 2 amounts right next to each other. Because of the fact that they're right next to each other, they're multiplied. Okay, so let's. What sign does the 4 have? I like to have my signs all ready to go, and 4 doesn't have one, so that means that it's positive. Okay, so we can do whichever one we want to do first. Doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and multiply this one then. Okay. What do you want to do? Remember that now we're multiplying signs and we're multiplying numbers. Signs and numbers. Later on, we're going to be multiplying signs, numbers, and letters. Okay, so, but not now, just later. But anyway, just to let you know what's coming in the future. I can see the future. Okay, so let's do the signs first. Positive times a negative is negative. 4 times 5 is 20. Okay. And remember, it's multiplied because the 4 is right up against the parentheses, right up against negative 5. The two numbers are together. That means multiplication. Okay, 5 can't have two signs. It can't be plus minus 5. We have to multiply those two signs. When we multiply, what do I have here? Positive times a negative, we get a negative, right? Okay. So this is an addition or a subtraction depending on the signs. Now, when the signs are the same, we add them. How do I know that? Well, the 20 isn't right next to minus 5. There's nothing showing that. That's what the parentheses would do. It would show that the 20 is stuck together with the 5, with the minus 5, and then we'd multiply that. But there are no parentheses anymore. We got rid of those. Okay? We got rid of them because we did those multiplications. So now this is actually an addition. When the signs are the same, we add them together and we maintain or we keep the same sign. So this would be minus 25. All right? Okay. Let's do another one. We're getting there, we're halfway there. What about this one? Do you see it? It's a division. Remember now, divisions are going to be fraction bars. We will rarely see this symbol anymore. You know, the symbol from the calculator, we really don't see them anymore. For multiplication, we don't see that little symbol anymore. And for division, we don't see this symbol anymore very much. You can't really forget what it means, but now division is going to be shown to us like this. It's going to be expressed typically in a fraction form. Okay, so I can't do the division until I find out what the numerator is. And to find out what the numerator is, it looks like I have to multiply because the negative 2 is stuck right up against the minus 10. Okay? If it wasn't, I guess another way to show this would be like this maybe. Now I have an operation, the plus, separating the 2. That would show that it's not multiplied anymore. Now what's being multiplied are the two signs because 10 can't have two signs. We multiply those two, get rid of the parentheses, and then we just have minus 2 and a minus 10, which we would add together as minus 12, right? Keep the same sign. But that's what I mean. The 2 is actually right up against. In other words, there's a 2, nothing else between them, right up against parentheses. That's a multiplication, okay? So let's do that again. And that was a minus 2, okay? So minus 2, nothing separating it from the parentheses. That means that they're touching, that they're together. It means multiplication. Okay, so let's do the numbers first. Why not? Let's multiply the numbers. 2 times 10 is 20. But can't forget my signs. Minus times a minus or a negative times a negative. Same sign, remember? It's a positive. And I'll go ahead and put my minus 5 underneath there now. Bring it down. Okay, so now we have a positive and a negative being divided. Positive 20 divided by negative 5. So that's going to give us, let's go ahead and do the signs first. Dividing positive divided by a negative, positive divided by negative is a negative. 20 divided by 5 is a 4. So our answer is going to be a negative 4. Okay? All right. And remember, I'm following my rules here. Positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative, so I have to remember that. Opposite signs gives a negative result when they're multiplied or divided. All right. Moving on to the next one. Two more, we're almost there. Well, let's just make it one more. What do you say? It's another division. When I was talking about the language of math, when I see this problem, I just see a division of two numbers. That's it. It's a number divided by a number. And it's this number, this whole number. It's in one number just expressed with other numbers and more symbols and more operations. But really, once I do all this work, it's going to be one number. And it's going to be divided by another number. When I do this addition, that's going to be one number as well. So it's just a number divided by a number. And again, if you can start seeing that, if you can start reading the language and looking at it in general terms, it's just this on top divided by what's on bottom. It's two numbers, okay? But we have to get to those two numbers. So how do we do that? We do the multiplication first. So in this case, what's being multiplied are these two signs because, again, 18 or any number can't have two signs in front of it. So let's go ahead and multiply those two signs. Minus times a minus, do you remember? Minus times a minus is a positive. Okay, so I'm just going to bring down my minus 6. Now it's a plus 18. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and do this addition? I mean, we can do that pretty quick. 8 plus 2. What sign does 8 have? It's a positive. Remember, if it doesn't have a sign, it's always a positive. So same signs, we just add them together and keep the same sign. So it's a plus 10. Okay. Actually, I'm looking at what I have written down over there before. I don't want to make the mistake, so sorry. Sorry. It's supposed to be a minus 8. Sorry, I wrote it down wrong. But it's okay. Just gives us another chance to practice, right? So we have a minus 8 plus 2. How do we do that? Different signs, we subtract them, and we keep the sign of the bigger number, correct? So the bigger number is 8, and its sign is negative, so our answer is going to be negative. Now we just subtract them. 8 minus 2 is 6. Okay? All right. Again, sorry for the little mistake, but anyhow. So continuing on here, let's do the numerator now. Let's find out what this one number is up here on top. How do we do that? Are they being multiplied? No, there's no parentheses. There's nothing showing that the two numbers are stuck together. So we have to subtract, right? Because the signs are different. The rule would be subtraction. And we keep the sign of the bigger number. I'm about to sneeze. It went away. Anyway, okay. So 18 minus 6 is 12. And the bigger number is positive, so we keep the positive. Let's go ahead and move the 6 over here now, the minus 6. And this is what I was getting at. This is what I meant. It's a number divided by a number. It's just two numbers being divided by each other. But we had to do this work to find out what those two numbers were. All right. So it's a division. I'm dividing a positive 12 by a negative 6. So a positive 12, positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. So my answer is going to be negative. I can go ahead and write that down. It's a negative. And then 12 divided by 6 is 2. It's a negative 2. Okay? So this is the beginning, or the introduction, I should say, to what order of operations is going to be. Now, order of operations is going to have more things to do, more operations, but it's also going to have a couple more rules. And the hard part, really, to be honest, I think, is usually the signs. Everybody hates the signs at first. And then it gets a little easier. Okay, so just remember, don't be too discouraged. You're learning a different language, and that takes time. And just keep practicing, make mistakes, and understand that your mistakes are typically going to be the signs. So again, just to repeat that, ounce of prevention will equal a pound of cure. If you get really good with your signage, if you understand those rules, how to multiply and divide with positive and negative numbers, and also how to add and subtract with positive and negative numbers. If you get that down solid, that's the begin. That's a great foundation. The next thing is to start understanding the language of algebra, which is now, at least what we learned today, two numbers together means multiplication. It's not necessarily the parentheses. It's really the fact that two numbers are right up against each other. That usually means multiplication. So now we have to start understanding the language, these expressions. Okay, so that's the first one. And the other one was division is going to be a fraction from now on. I think that's about that for this video. Good luck. Keep practicing.